We've had the clearest indication this week the government is heading towards committing in some form to net zero emissions by the year 2050. The Treasurer giving a speech warning of the cost of not acting, something a lot of people have been talking about over the years outside of the Liberal Party. For more on this, I'm joined by Liberal MP Jason Falinski, who's been good enough to give us a part of his Saturday in lockdown. Jason, good to have your company as ever. On 2050, this commitment, realistically, is the easy part, isn't it? The short-term commitment's the big thing, and that's the thing that's more relevant for your government. What's your view on a 2035 target and what it should be?
Oh, mate, I have no idea what it should be. By the way, Tommy, nice to see you on a Saturday. It makes me feel like I'm still at work. So how's it? How much time do we have? Do we have 35 minutes? Are we bringing it home for you, or...?
Look, let's just say things are not as constrained as normal, but I won't hesitate to cut you off.
Oh, that's right. The premiers don't work on Saturday. Is that right? They don't have their press conferences.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, we don't have their company. Sorry. So, yeah, one of your colleagues put a number on it, Dave Sharma. What do you feel about what he said on 2035?
So Dave reckons 45% by 2035 is pretty much what the modelling is saying that we'll get to. I guess my point on this is that we're going to be, I mean, even the modelling that we released last year showed that we were going to get to around about 35% by 2030. So we were going to exceed 28% by 400 million tonnes. I think it would be politically, leaving policy aside, pretty, less than optimal for us not to actually update that target, because otherwise our opponents can just simply go along and bank it and say, oh, well, they're still at 28%, but we'll say 35%, even though that's what we're headed towards anyway. So I think we should update the target at very least. Dave was saying that some of the models he's seen show 45% reduction by 2035. If that's right, then that's what we should head towards as well.
And that's what you're talking about there is essentially the country getting there anyway on other things that are happening within the whole economy. Right. So with all the warnings we're getting from the IPCC and also the warning from our Treasurer that it's going to cost us not to get there in terms of how we'll be viewed around the world, doesn't that strengthen the case for going beyond that? Yes, it might cost something, but doesn't it strengthen the case to go even beyond 45?
Yeah, I think so, Tom, because look, maybe I should think about that. But I think what you're saying is right, which is that, and what Josh was basically saying, is that there's there's a poultice amount of money in what we call in Australia ESG. And so we have all these sorts of natural advantages in Australia. We're a pretty warm continent. We've got large land mass that's reasonably unpopulated. It's pretty clean. So our capacity to develop, for example, large solar installations, like you look at the Sun City cable, which is basically based at in the Northern Territory, and we'll run a cable through Indonesia to Singapore. So we're essentially exporting electricity to Singapore from a solar array in the Northern Territory. So there's a lot of money around. And what Josh is basically saying is if we have that framework, we'll be able to tap those capital markets that will see us develop a lot of renewable energy industries and exports. And I suspect Sun City is just one example of what will be a huge number. So, the answer to that question is obviously, if you're using all of that, then you'll get to a position where you probably exceed 45% by 2035 in any case. I guess we need to be a bit more cautious and just make sure that that's actually going to happen before we commit to it.
All right, well, look, we'll know more about numbers and so on soon, so perhaps we'll take that up again, no doubt, with your good friend Patrick Gorman. On the Melbourne protests, though...
Where is Patrick? Why did you let him off the Saturday appearance?
Well, there wasn't compulsory attendance. It's not a detention, as much as it might feel like one. So, look,
you said to me I had to come.
Well, we'll check the record on that one. But Patrick's got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of a grand final there before they let everyone go and put up the Great Wall of Western Australia. So he's got to soak that up while he can. Melbourne protests, though. Very peaceful today. I'm not sure how much you saw of this, but much more peaceful. And a lot of these people were basically turning up and just trying to put attention on the fact that you've got a harsh and a long lockdown that's happening, and they still get arrested because basically it's illegal to protest right now in Melbourne. Is it a troubling time to be a Liberal?
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you're like a philosophical Liberal, to see government action of this nature which impinges on the rights and freedoms of individuals, yeah, it's a really worrying time. I mean, Immanuel Kant said that basically the purpose of the state was to maximise the freedom of the individual wholly consistent with freedoms of others, and to allow peaceful demonstration is pretty much at the top end of those freedoms and rights that we as citizens of the state enjoy. Now, that is not to say that if you're in the middle of a pandemic that you might want to stop people from basically coalescing in a time and a place that allows for a super spreader event, and there are health consequences of that. And that's the second part of Kant's equation, which is that it has to be wholly consistent with the rights of others. But what we've seen in New South Wales, at least, and I believe it's the same in Victoria, there is no known case of COVID-19 transmission outdoors. And, I defended the right of the Black Lives Matters protest last year in the middle of the pandemic, when we knew far less about this virus than we do today, to allow that they should have the right to march peacefully in Sydney, which they did. And I think that sort of comes down to this as well. Like, no one's saying it should be a free-for-all. I mean, there should obviously be due considerations taken. But it's been a troubling time to be a Liberal, and the sooner we can return to normal transmission and the normal relationship that people have with their governments returns, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
We've had a lot of talk of Freedom Day. Do we need to have a point in time where we're no longer hearing leaders say that whatever the health advice is, they follow it?
I think that time has come. I mean, my real worry about this
That's now, is it?
I don't know when it is. But look, my real worry about this has been, as we get to the tail end of this, as you start to see vaccination rates over 80%, that, the flu season every year has a lot of people being admitted to hospital. It does put a strain on our health system, whether it's in all the states and territories. So the question becomes, what's stopping health officials next year or the year after or in 3 years' time saying, oh, look, we've got the flu season coming up, it's going to be very difficult for our health systems, and therefore we're going to impose limited lockdown orders on people so we can manage the call on our health system. I mean, that would be, I think, a really dangerous situation. And, we have the situation in Melbourne where essentially the Victorian government used health orders to try and stop a protest from occurring. Now, the media reported that without, in my view, saying anything about it, without analysing that. So now so at that point, the health orders were not being used for health purposes. They were being used to actually control people, whether people could protest and whether they could assemble. And I think that was a line that was crossed, and it got very little attention.
All right. Just finally, if I could get this in 30 seconds.
Do you not agree with that, or do you think do you think I'm over-exaggerating, or?
Well, look, I think part of it is it's a bit difficult to tell, right? Because in terms of some of the transparency of things, sometimes we're unsure what the advice is, but certainly on a whole range of issues, if we followed health advice to the nth degree, we would live very differently to how we do. I don't think there's much argument about that. Look, it's hard to know. Some people say, well, if we followed every health advice, bits of health advice, we wouldn't drive faster than 20 kilometres. Well, maybe, but maybe the health advice wouldn't be that extreme. So perhaps some of the analogies are a bit too neat, but I'm not going to disagree that, we need to... Health advice is one thing, and then it's, you've got to also live life. Anyway, not that anyone cares what I think, apart from maybe you. If I could get your thoughts in 30 seconds. Schools still shut down.
Yes.
30 seconds, here's your challenge. Schools still shut down until November, essentially the full reopening in Sydney. Is that a disappointing timeline from the Premier?
Yeah, really disappointing timeline. I mean, we're opening pubs and hairdressers before we're opening schools. And I think the only focus, frankly, of the state government before it moves on to anything in New South Wales should be getting schools reopened for everyone. So that really is very disappointing.
Jason, appreciate this time on a Saturday. You can get back to your family. We displayed it was Melbourne where you are, just assuring your voters that you haven't escaped the Sydney lockdown. You're still there. You're in Sydney.
I am.
I am.
Thank you, mate.
We'll talk next week.
Well, hey, enjoy your last half hour. See you, Tommy. Bye, mate.
Jason Falinski there live out of his home office